Welcome back. Let us employ the little gray cells once more. In the hushed twilight of Voss Manor, where the autumn mists clung to ancient stones like secrets too heavy to rise, a single note lingered in the air, a note not played, but felt, like the tremor of a truth about to unravel. Hercule Poirot, his keen eyes glinting beneath the brim of his hat, stepped from the motor car, sensing the weight of an invitation that promised music but whispered of menace. Within those ivy-clad walls, a genius composer prepared to unveil his final symphony, its cryptic strains hiding a message only a mind as sharp as Poirot's could decipher. Yet, as the lamps flickered to life, casting shadows that danced with unspoken grudges, one question hung unanswered. Whose hand would silence the maestro before the final chord? Chapter 1. The Gathering at Voss Manor. The autumnal mists clung to the rolling hills of the English countryside like a reluctant lover, veiling the ancient stone facade of Voss Manor in a shroud of ethereal mystery. It was one of those grand estates that seemed to have sprung from the pages of a Gothic novel, with its towering turrets piercing the overcast sky, and its ivy-clad walls whispering secrets of bygone eras. Built in the Elizabethan style but renovated with Victorian excesses, the manor stood as a testament to the Voss family's enduring, if somewhat tarnished, legacy. Maestro Elias Voss, the current lord of the manor and a composer whose name evoked both admiration and envy in musical circles, had chosen this secluded haven to unveil his latest masterpiece, a symphony that promised to redefine the boundaries of orchestral expression. On this particular evening in late October, the air was crisp with the scent of fallen leaves and wood smoke from the village below. The gravel driveway crunched under the wheels of arriving motor cars, their headlights slicing through the gathering dusk like inquisitive eyes. Hercule Poirot, the diminutive Belgian detective whose reputation for unraveling the most perplexing enigmas preceded him like a fanfare, stepped out of a sleek Bentley, adjusting his immaculate patent leather shoes against the damp earth. Beside him was his faithful companion, Captain Arthur Hastings, a man of sturdy build and straightforward demeanor, whose military background lent him an air of reliability amid the artistic frivolities about to unfold. "Mon ami Hastings," Poirot remarked, his voice a precise melody of accented English. "Observe how the English countryside conspires with the elements to create an atmosphere of intrigue. It is as if the very fog anticipates the drama within these walls." He straightened his perfectly knotted tie and smoothed his waxed mustache, those twin points of vanity that were as much a part of his arsenal as his legendary little gray cells. Hastings chuckled, rubbing his hands together against the chill. "You're always seeing mysteries where there are none, Poirot. This is just a musical soirée, isn't it? Maestro Voss invited you because of your fondness for the opera, or so the telegram said. Though I must admit the place does have a rather brooding charm." Poirot's green eyes twinkled with amusement. "Ah, but music, Hastings, it is the language of the soul, and souls, they hide many secrets. Voss's invitation was most insistent. He speaks of a private premiere, with a hint of something more. We shall see." As they ascended the broad stone steps to the entrance, flanked by ornate lanterns flickering with gaslight, the heavy oak doors swung open to reveal a butler of impeccable poise. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings," the man intoned with a bow, his voice echoing slightly in the vast hall. "The maestro awaits you in the drawing-room. May I take your coats?" The interior of Voss Manor was a symphony in itself, a harmonious blend of opulence and antiquity. The entrance hall boasted a marble floor inlaid with intricate patterns, above which soared a vaulted ceiling adorned with frescoes depicting mythological muses. Crystal chandeliers dangled like frozen cascades, casting prismatic light upon walls lined with portraits of Voss ancestors, stern-faced gentlemen in powdered wigs, and ladies with enigmatic smiles. The air carried the faint aroma of beeswax polish mingled with the richer notes of cigar smoke and floral arrangements, vast bouquets of chrysanthemums and roses that seemed to nod in greeting. They were ushered into the drawing-room, a spacious chamber dominated by a roaring fireplace where logs crackled merrily, warding off the encroaching cold. Velvet drapes in deep crimson-framed tall windows overlooking the manicured gardens, now shrouded in twilight. A grand piano stood sentinel in one corner, its lid propped open as if ready to burst into song, while scattered about were clusters of armchairs and seventies upholstered in brocade, inviting intimate conversations. The guests had already begun to assemble, a select coterie of individuals whose connections to the maestro formed a web of professional rivalries, personal loyalties, and unspoken tensions. At the center of it all stood Elias Voss himself, a man in his late 50s with a mane of silver hair that swept back from a high forehead, giving him the appearance of a romantic poet transported to the modern age. His eyes, sharp and piercing, held a fire that spoke of genius, bordering on mania. Dressed in a tailored evening suit with a silk cravat, he moved with the fluid grace of a conductor, gesturing animatedly as he greeted arrivals. "Ah, Monsieur Poirot!" Voss exclaimed, striding forward with outstretched hand. "What an honor to have the great detective grace my humble abode. And Captain Hastings, of course. I trust the journey from London was not too arduous." Poirot inclined his head graciously. "Not at all, maestro. The English roads, they are a marvel compared to the cobbles of Brussels. Your invitation intrigued me greatly. A symphony with a message, you say? Most unusual." Voss's laughter boomed, a resonant baritone that filled the room. "Indeed, indeed. But we shall come to that in due course. First, allow me to introduce you to my charming wife, Lydia." Lydia Voss glided forward, a vision of elegance in a gown of midnight blue satin that accentuated her slender figure. Her dark hair was swept into an elaborate chignon, adorned with a single diamond clip that caught the firelight. In her early 40s, she possessed a beauty that was both refined and remote, her smile a careful construct that did not quite reach her violet eyes. There was a tightness to her expression, as if she were perpetually on guard, a sentinel in her own home. "Enchanted, Monsieur Poirot?" she said, extending a gloved hand. Her voice was low and cultured, with a hint of a continental accent, perhaps French or Italian. "Elias speaks so highly of your exploits. It's refreshing to have a man of intellect among us musicians who can be so temperamental." Poirot bowed over her hand with continental flair. "Madame, the pleasure is mine. And might I say, your home is a masterpiece in itself." As Lydia murmured a polite thanks, Poirot's keen gaze noted the subtle tremor in her fingers, the way her eyes flicked toward the door as if expecting or dreading another arrival. "Hastings, ever the gentleman, engaged her in small talk about the weather, but Poirot's mind was already at work, cataloguing the nuances of human behavior. Next to be introduced was Adrian Hale, Voss's ambitious protégé. A young man in his late 20s, Hale cut a dashing figure with his wavy auburn hair and sharp features, dressed in a suit that bespoke aspiring sophistication. He fidgeted incessantly with his cufflinks, twisting them as if they held some hidden mechanism. His eyes, a piercing blue, held a hunger that Poirot recognized all too well, the ambition of youth, eager to eclipse its mentor. "Mr. Hale," Voss said with paternal pride, clapping the young man on the shoulder. "My right hand in composition. Without him, this symphony might still be mere sketches on paper." Hale flashed a smile that was all charm and calculation. "You're too kind, Maestro. It's an honor to assist a genius like yourself." Turning to Poirot, he added, "I've read about your cases, sir. Fascinating how you piece together clues like musical motifs." Poirot nodded appreciatively. "Ah, but in music, as in detection, it is the discord that reveals the harmony. Tell me, Monsieur Hale, how long have you studied under Maestro Voss?" 3 years now," Hale replied, his fingers stilling momentarily on his cufflinks. "He's taught me everything, from counterpoint to the subtleties of orchestration. This new symphony, it's revolutionary." There was a note of possessiveness in his voice, Poirot thought, as if the work were as much his as Voss's. Interesting. Lurking in a shadowed corner near the fireplace was Bertram Kline, Voss's rival composer, a burly man of middle age with a scowling brow and a beard that jutted defiantly. Kline exuded the aura of a thwarted artist. His suit was rumpled as if he disdained the formalities of the occasion, and he clutched a glass of whiskey with knuckles white from grip. "Bertram, old chap," Voss called out jovially, though there was an undercurrent of mockery. "Come meet our distinguished guests." Kline approached with reluctance, his scowl deepening. "Poirot, eh?" The detective. "What, Voss, afraid someone might steal your precious notes?" His laugh was a bark, devoid of humor. Poirot met his gaze steadily. "Monsieur Kline, I am merely a humble admirer of music. Your own works, the Requiem for Lost Dreams, it moved me deeply." Kline's expression softened fractionally. "You know it? Few do these days. Voss here overshadows us all." The bitterness was palpable, like a sour note in an otherwise melodious chord. As Kline retreated to his corner, Poirot observed the way his eyes followed Voss, a mix of resentment and something akin to envy. Rivals, yes, but perhaps more intertwined than appeared. Efficiently organizing stacks of musical scores on a side table was Clara Thorne, Voss's secretary. A woman in her mid-30s, she possessed a quiet efficiency that bordered on invisibility. Her mousy brown hair was pinned back severely, and her spectacles perched on a nose that suggested scholarly pursuits. Dressed in a modest gray frock, she moved with the precision of a metronome, her hands deft among the papers. "Miss Thorne," Voss introduced, "the keeper of my chaos. Without her, I'd be lost in a sea of scribbles." Clara looked up, her cheeks flushing slightly. "It's my pleasure, Maestro. Everything is prepared for the premiere." Her voice was soft, almost whispery, but there was a steadiness to it, a core of resolve. Poirot engaged her briefly. "Mademoiselle, you must have an ear for music to handle such manuscripts." She adjusted her spectacles. "I do my best, sir. The maestro's work is inspiring. Her eyes lingered on Voss a moment too long, betraying perhaps more than professional admiration. Finally, there was Dr. Felix Lang, the enigmatic musicologist, a tall, gaunt figure with hollow cheeks and piercing gray eyes. Lang carried himself with the air of a scholar haunted by knowledge. His dark suit hung loosely on his frame, and a faint scar traced his left temple, hinting at a past adventure or mishap. He stood apart, observing the room with detached interest. "Dr. Lang," Voss said, his tone neutral. "Our expert on musical cryptology. He's come all the way from Vienna." Lang bowed stiffly. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings. A pleasure." Voss's invitation was intriguing. Poirot's interest piqued. Cryptology in music? Like the codes of Bach or Schumann? Lang's lips twitched in a semblance of a smile. "Precisely. Music has long been a vessel for hidden messages. Voss claims his symphony contains one such enigma." As the introductions concluded, the group mingled, the room filling with the murmur of conversation, punctuated by the clink of glasses. Servants circulated with trays of canapés, delicate vol au vents filled with crab, slices of foie gras on toast points, and crystal flutes of champagne bubbling invitingly. The fire's warmth contrasted with the chill draughts seeping from the windows, creating pockets of comfort amid the vast space. Poirot, ever the observer, positioned himself near a window, sipping his champagne sparingly. He watched as Lydia Voss engaged Adrian Hale in quiet conversation by the piano, her hand brushing his arm in a gesture that could be casual or intimate. Hale's face lit with animation, his cufflink fidgeting forgotten for the moment. Across the room, Bertram Kline nursed his whiskey, his scowl directed at the pair, while Clara Thorne hovered nearby, her eyes darting between her employer and his wife. Dr. Lang approached Poirot, his voice low. "You are a man who appreciates puzzles, monsieur. What do you make of this gathering?" Poirot tilted his head. "It is a mosaic, doctor. Each piece colorful, but how they fit, that is the question." Lang nodded thoughtfully. "Voss has enemies, you know. In the world of composition, success breeds jealousy." Before Poirot could probe further, Voss clapped his hands for attention, the room falling silent. "My dear friends," he announced, his voice resonant, "tonight is not merely a performance. This symphony, my enigma variations on a shadow, wait, no, I jest. It's simply titled Symphony No. 7 holds within its manuscript a cryptic message, encoded in the notes themselves, a sequence that defies the score's logic. Sharps where flats should be, rests that interrupt the flow. Only the keenest mind will decipher it. Perhaps even you, Monsieur Poirot?" The room buzzed with intrigue. Hastings leaned in. "A code in music? Sounds like one of your cases, Poirot." Poirot's mustache twitched. "Indeed. But why announce it, Maestro? To tantalize or to warn?" Voss smiled enigmatically. "All will be revealed after the performance. Now, let us adjourn to the salon for the premiere." As the group moved toward the adjoining salon, a smaller chamber set up with chairs facing a raised platform where a string quartet and pianist awaited, Poirot lingered, his mind whirring. The announcement had shifted the atmosphere. Eyes now held speculation, hands gestures of concealed intent. In the salon, the walls were paneled in rich mahogany, absorbing sound to create an intimate acoustic. Candelabra provided soft illumination, casting long shadows that danced with the guests' movements. The musicians tuned their instruments, a violinist's bow drawing a plaintive note, the cello's deep hum resonating like a heartbeat. Seated beside Hastings, Poirot scanned the faces, Lydia's tight smile, Adrian's eager lean, Bertram's folded arms, Clara's notebook at the ready, Lang's impassive stare. Voss took the podium, baton in hand, and with a flourish the music began. The symphony opened with a soaring melody, strings weaving a tapestry of emotion that evoked longing and mystery. As it progressed, Poirot's trained ear detected anomalies, those cryptic notes Voss had mentioned, a sharp where harmony demanded a natural, a rest that paused the rhythm unnaturally. To the untrained, it might pass as artistic license, but to Poirot it was deliberate. Midway through the first movement, a servant entered discreetly, whispering to Lydia. She nodded, excusing herself briefly. Poirot noted it, as he noted Kline's furtive glance at his watch, Hale's whispered comment to Clara. The music swelled, building tension like a gathering storm. Voss conducted with passion, sweat beading on his brow. Then, abruptly, he faltered, his baton trembling. The musicians continued, but Voss clutched his throat, eyes widening in alarm. He staggered, collapsing to the floor amid gasps. Chaos erupted. Hastings sprang forward. Good Lord! What's happened? Poirot knelt swiftly, detecting the acrid scent of bitter almonds. Cyanide, he murmured. Quick, call for a doctor. But as the room dissolved into pandemonium, Poirot's gaze fell on the open manuscript on the podium. Those cryptic notes stared back, a silent accusation, or plea. The evening's entertainment had become a tragedy, and the gathering at Voss Manor a stage for murder. Yet this was merely the prelude. The true composition of deceit was just beginning to unfold. Chapter 2. The Fatal Premiere. The grand salon of Voss Manor, moments ago a haven of musical anticipation, had transformed into a tableau of shock and disarray. The haunting strains of Elias Voss's Symphony No. 7 hung in the air like a fading echo, abruptly silenced by the collapse of the maestro himself. The polished mahogany walls, adorned with gilt-frame mirrors reflecting the flickering candelabra, seemed to close in, amplifying the gasps and cries of the assembled guests. The string quartet faltered, their bows trembling as they lowered their instruments, while the pianist's hands hovered over the keys, frozen in mid-chord. On the raised platform, Voss lay crumpled, his silver hair disheveled, his face contorted in a grimace of agony that marred his once commanding presence. Hercule Poirot, ever the calm eye in a storm, knelt beside the fallen composer, his gloved fingers deftly checking for a pulse at Voss's wrist. The bitter almond scent, faint but unmistakable, lingered about the maestro's lips, confirming Poirot's grim suspicion. "Cyanide," he said softly, his voice cutting through the chaos with the precision of a conductor's baton. "He is dead, I fear." Captain Arthur Hastings, standing just behind, paled visibly, his military bearing shaken. "Good heavens, Poirot! Poison, here, in front of us all. Who could have done such a thing?" His eyes darted to the guests, who had risen from their chairs in a flurry of movement, some frozen in horror, others edging closer to the platform with morbid curiosity. Poirot rose, brushing a speck of dust from his immaculate evening suit, his green eyes scanning the room with the intensity of a hawk. "That, mon ami, is the question we must answer. But first, order must be restored. The little gray cells, they require clarity to function. The manuscript of Symphony No. 7 lay open on the podium, its pages splayed as if caught in a sudden gust. Poirot's gaze lingered on the score, noting the annotations that Voss had boasted of earlier, those cryptic sequences of sharps, flats, and rests that disrupted the musical flow. They formed a pattern, deliberate and discordant, like a coded message woven into the fabric of the composition. He resolved to examine it further, but for now the living demanded his attention. Lydia Voss, who had returned from her brief absence just as the tragedy unfolded, let out a theatrical wail, collapsing into a chair with her hands pressed to her face. Her midnight blue gown fanned around her like a pool of ink, and her diamond hair clip glinted as she trembled. "Elias! Oh, my darling, no!" she cried, though Poirot noted the careful arrangement of her pose, as if she were an actress aware of her audience. Adrian Hale, the young protégé, stood rooted near the platform, his face a mask of shock, though his blue eyes flickered toward the manuscript with an intensity that bordered on greed. "This can't be happening," he muttered, his fingers resuming their nervous dance with his cufflinks. "He was fine, just moments ago." Bertram Kline, the rival composer, pushed forward from the back of the room, his bearded face flushed with agitation. "Enemies aplenty, that's what he had," he growled, his whiskey glass still clutched in one hand. "Voss trod on too many toes, mark my words." His scowl swept the room, as if daring anyone to contradict him. Clara Thorne, the secretary, hovered near the podium, clutching her notebook as if it were a lifeline. Her spectacles slipped down her nose, and she pushed them up with a trembling hand. "He was working late last night, alone," she whispered, almost to herself, her eyes wide with something akin to fear. "He seemed preoccupied." Dr. Felix Lang, the musicologist, remained apart, leaning against a wall with an air of detached observation. His gaunt features betrayed no emotion, but his gray eyes followed every movement, as if cataloguing the scene for later analysis. When Poirot's gaze met his, Lang inclined his head slightly, a gesture that seemed to acknowledge the detective's scrutiny. Poirot clapped his hand sharply, the sound cutting through the murmurs like a gunshot. "Mesdames et messieurs, please return to your seats. We must remain calm. The police will be summoned, but until they arrive, I, Hercule Poirot, will ensure that no evidence is disturbed. This is now a matter of murder." The word murder sent a fresh ripple of tension through the room. Lydia's sobs grew louder, though Poirot noted the absence of tears staining her cheeks. Adrian sank into a chair, his hands clasped tightly, while Bertram muttered something unintelligible and drained his glass. Clara hesitated, then sat, her notebook open on her lap, as if she might record the proceedings. Lang merely crossed his arms, his expression unreadable. Hastings, ever practical, moved to the door to instruct the butler to telephone the local constabulary. "And fetch a doctor just in case," he added, though his voice betrayed little hope. Returning to Poirot's side, he whispered, "This is a devil of a mess, old chap. Poison in a room full of people? It's madness." "Madness, perhaps," Poirot replied, his voice low, "but methodical madness. Cyanide acts swiftly, within minutes. The poison was administered here, tonight, likely in something he consumed. We must consider the sherry." He gestured toward a small table near the podium, where a crystal decanter and several glasses stood, one of which lay tipped over near Voss's body, a faint amber stain spreading on the polished wood. The scent of almonds was stronger there, confirming Poirot's suspicion. The sherry was served before the performance. We must ascertain who poured it, who handled it. Hastings nodded, his brow furrowed. Lydia was overseeing the drinks, wasn't she? I saw her near the table earlier, fussing with the glasses. But let us not leap to conclusions, Poirot cautioned. The hand that pours is not always the hand that poisons. We must observe, question, and deduce. Turning to the guests, Poirot adopted a tone of quiet authority. I must ask that no one leaves this room until we have spoken further. Each of you was present when the tragedy occurred. Each of you may hold a piece of the puzzle. Lydia looked up, her violet eyes flashing with indignation. Surely you don't suspect us, Monsieur Poirot? We're his friends, his family. Her voice trembled, but there was a brittleness to it, like porcelain on the verge of cracking. Poirot inclined his head politely. Madame, in a matter of murder, all are suspect until proven otherwise. Now, if you please, tell me, when did you last see your husband before the performance? Lydia dabbed at her eyes with a lace handkerchief, though they remained suspiciously dry. Just before we gathered in the drawing-room. He was in his study, going over the score. He seemed excited, but nervous. He kept muttering about the manuscript, about it being perfect at last. "And you poured the sherry?" Poirot asked, his tone gentle but probing. "Yes, I did," she admitted, her chin lifting defiantly. "For all the guests. It's my duty as hostess, but I assure you I had no reason to harm Elias. I loved him, despite everything." Poirot's eyebrows rose slightly at the pause, but he pressed no further for the moment. Instead, he turned to Adrian Hale. "Monsieur Hale, you were close to the maestro. Did he speak to you of this cryptic message in the symphony?" Adrian's fingers paused on his cufflinks, his expression guarded. "He mentioned it in passing, yes, said it was a game, a challenge for those who understood music theory. I didn't think much of it, just Voss being dramatic, as usual." "Dramatic, perhaps," Poirot mused, "but deliberate. Tell me, what was your relationship with him like? A protégé, oui, but were there tensions?" Adrian hesitated, his eyes flicking to Lydia, then back to Poirot. "We had our disagreements. He could be demanding, but I owed him everything. He saw potential in me when no one else did." Poirot nodded, filing away the young man's defensiveness. He approached Bertram Kline, who was refilling his glass from a decanter on a sideboard, ignoring the one tainted by poison. "Monsieur Kline, you spoke of enemies. Who might have wished the maestro harm?" Kline snorted, his beard bristling. "Take your pick." Voss had a knack for making people feel small. Critics, other composers, even his own musicians. He sued me years ago, claimed I stole one of his melodies. Cost me a commission in Vienna. I didn't shed tears when he fell, I'll tell you that. His candor was refreshing, if brutal, and Poirot noted the lack of pretense. "And where were you when the sherry was served?" "Skulking in the drawing-room, avoiding Voss's—" "Preening," Kline replied. "I didn't touch the stuff. Whiskey's my poison, figuratively speaking." He raised his glass with a grim smile. Clara Thorne, still clutching her notebook, spoke up unprompted. "Monsieur Poirot, I helped set up the salon before the performance. The decanter was already on the table when I arrived. I didn't see who filled it, but Elias was particular about his sherry. He always insisted on the finest amontillado, Merci, Mademoiselle Thorne, Poirot said, his eyes narrowing slightly. And you say he was alone last night, working on the manuscript? Yes, she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. I offered to stay, but he sent me away. He was adding those strange notes by hand, muttering about a legacy. I thought it was just his eccentricity. Dr. Lang, who had remained silent, finally spoke, his voice cool and measured. The manuscript is the key, Monsieur Poirot. Those annotations are not mere whimsy. They form a cipher, though I haven't yet cracked it. Voss was a student of musical cryptology, you know. He admired composers like Elgar, who hid meanings in their scores. Poirot's interest sharpened. A cipher, you say? And you, a musicologist, are familiar with such things. Did Voss share his intentions with you? Lang shook his head. Only hints. He said the message would reveal a truth, nothing more. I came here to study the score, not to witness this. The butler returned, breathless, to announce that the police and a doctor were on their way from the nearby town of Ashbourne, though it would take some time given the winding country roads. Poirot took charge, instructing the servants to seal the exits and guard the salon. No one is to touch the decanter or the manuscript, he declared. They are evidence, and evidence must not be compromised. As the guests settled uneasily, Poirot approached the podium, his gloved hands carefully lifting the manuscript. The pages were heavy with ink, the notes meticulously written, but those odd annotations stood out like blemishes on a masterpiece. He traced a sequence, a sharp where a flat should be, a rest that broke the rhythm, a series of notes that seemed to spell something when viewed as a pattern. His mind began to work, decoding silently. Hastings leaned in, whispering, "What do you make of it, Poirot?" "It's gibberish to me." "Not gibberish, Hastings," Poirot replied, his voice low. "It is a message, as Voss promised. A simple substitution cipher, perhaps, using the musical alphabet. If A is the first note, G the seventh. Oui, it begins to form words." He paused, his eyes gleaming. The first part of the message, it reads, "Beware the shadow from the past." A warning or a confession? We shall see. The room grew quiet, the weight of the tragedy settling like dust. Lydia's sobs had subsided to sniffles. Adrian's fingers twitched restlessly. Bertram glowered into his glass. Clara scribbled in her notebook, and Lang watched with the stillness of a predator. Each face held a secret, Poirot knew, and each secret was a note in the symphony of deceit, now playing out. As the distant wail of a police siren approached, Poirot straightened, his mustache curving slightly. "The little gray cells, they are awake, Hastings. This murder, it is not random. It is composed like the maestro's music, with precision and purpose, and we shall uncover its final movement." Chapter 3. Interrogations begin. The first light of dawn crept over the mist-shrouded hills surrounding Voss Manor, casting a pallid glow through the tall windows of the drawing-room. The opulent chamber, which had buzzed with anticipation and chatter the previous evening, now bore the somber weight of tragedy. The crimson velvet drapes hung heavily, as if mourning the loss of their master, and the crystal chandeliers overhead seemed dimmer, their prisms refracting the weak sunlight into fragmented rainbows that danced mockingly on the polished parquet floor. The grand piano in the corner stood silent, its keys untouched, a mute witness to the abrupt end of Elias Voss's final performance. The air was thick with the lingering scent of extinguished candles and the faint, acrid trace of the previous night's horror, mingled now with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee served by subdued servants. Hercule Poirot, impeccably attired in a fresh suit of dove-gray wool with a silk tie pinned by a pearl, stood before the assembled group, his posture erect and his waxed mustache perfectly symmetrical. He had risen early, his little gray cells already humming with activity, and had insisted on gathering the suspects here, away from the sealed salon where Voss's body had been discreetly covered and guarded overnight by the local constable. Captain Arthur Hastings, looking somewhat haggard from a restless night in one of the manor's guest rooms, stood by Poirot's side, his notebook at the ready. The police inspector from Ashbourne, a stout man named Inspector Graves, with a mustache that paled in comparison to Poirot's, had arrived at first light, and deferred to the Belgian detective's expertise, content for now to observe and take notes. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice clear and resonant, cutting through the tense silence like a violinist's bow on a taut string. "We convene this morning under the shadow of a heinous crime. Maestro Elias Voss was poisoned with cyanide, administered in his sherry during the premiere of his symphony. The poison, it acts swiftly, within minutes, and thus the perpetrator is among us. I, Hercule Poirot, with the assistance of Inspector Graves, will conduct interrogations. We seek the truth, and the truth, it will emerge from the details you provide." The suspects sat in a semicircle of armchairs and settees, their faces etched with varying degrees of fatigue, grief, and weariness. Lydia Voss, clad in a somber black morning dress that accentuated her pallor, clutched a cup of coffee with unsteady hands, her violet eyes rimmed with red, though whether from genuine tears or artful application, Poirot wondered. Adrian Hale, his auburn hair tousled and his suit rumpled from a sleepless night, fidgeted with his cufflinks more vigorously than ever, his blue eyes darting about the room. Bertram Kline slouched in his chair, his beard unkempt, and his expression one of defiant gloom, nursing a tumbler of brandy, despite the early hour. Clara Thorne, in a simple gray blouse and skirt, sat primly with her spectacles perched on her nose, her notebook open on her lap, as if ready to transcribe the proceedings. Dr. Felix Lang, gaunt and composed in a dark suit, leaned back with crossed legs, his gray eyes observing the group with the detachment of a scholar studying an experiment. Inspector Graves cleared his throat, his voice gruff. "We've confirmed the cyanide in the sherry glass and decanter. No fingerprints of note, smudged, mostly. The doctor estimates time of death around 8:30 last evening, during the performance. Now, Mr. Poirot, if you'd proceed." Poirot nodded graciously. "Merci, Inspector. We shall begin with Madame Voss. As the hostess, you poured the drinks, no?" Lydia set down her cup with a clatter, her gloved hands folding in her lap. "Yes, I did," she admitted, her voice steady, but laced with emotion. "It was my duty." Elias always enjoyed a sip of sherry before conducting. It steadied his nerves. I poured for everyone, including myself. She paused, her eyes darting briefly to Adrian Hale before returning to Poirot. "But I loved my husband, Monsieur Poirot. Despite his infidelities, I forgave him. He was a genius, you see, and geniuses are not bound by ordinary rules." Poirot's eyebrows arched slightly. "Infidelities, madame? You speak of them openly. Were there specific indiscretions?" Lydia's cheeks flushed, and she glanced away toward the window where the mist was beginning to lift. Elias had a wandering eye. There were rumors, actresses, singers, even admirers from his tours. But I turned a blind eye. Our marriage was one of convenience at first, but it grew into something more. I would never harm him. Hastings jotted notes furiously, whispering to Poirot, "Sounds like motive to me. Jealousy." Poirot silenced him with a subtle gesture, turning his attention to the manuscript, which lay on a nearby table under police guard. He had spent the early hours examining it further, his keen mind decoding the cryptic annotations. "Madame, did your husband mention this message in the score?" "These odd notes, they form a cipher." Lydia shook her head. "He was secretive about his work lately. He said it was a surprise, but nothing more." Poirot nodded thoughtfully, then shifted his gaze to Adrian Hale. "Monsieur Hale, as the protégé, you were close to Voss. Tell us of your relationship. Were there arguments?" Adrian straightened, his fingers stilling on his cufflinks for a moment. "We argued, yes," he confessed, his voice tinged with reluctance. "Just yesterday afternoon, in his study. He promised me co-authorship on the symphony. I contributed ideas, motifs even. But he reneged, said it was his alone. I was furious, but I didn't. I couldn't have poisoned him." Poirot stroked his mustache. "And where were you when the sherry was poured?" "In the drawing-room, talking with Clara," Adrian replied quickly. "I took a glass from the tray. Nothing unusual." Clara nodded confirmation, her cheeks coloring slightly. "Yes, that's right. We were discussing the score." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Ah, the score. Let us discuss this cryptic message. Using a simple musical cipher, where notes correspond to letters, sharps and flats altering the sequence, it spells, 'Beware the shadow from the past.' A warning, perhaps, but from whom and to whom?" The room stirred with murmurs. Bertram Kline let out a harsh laugh. "Shadow from the past? Voss had plenty of those. He stole my melodies years ago, plagiarized them outright in his third symphony. I sued him, lost everything in court fees. If anyone's a shadow, it's me, but I didn't kill the bastard." Poirot turned to him sharply. "Monsieur Kline, a lawsuit? Tell us more." Kline leaned forward, his beard jutting aggressively. "It was 10 years ago. I composed a suite for strings. Voss heard it at a private recital, then incorporated the main theme into his work, claimed it was inspiration. The court sided with him, money talks. I've been scraping by ever since, while he basked in glory." "And your whereabouts last evening?" Poirot inquired. "Brooding in the corner as usual," Kline growled. "I avoided the sherry. Stick to whiskey. Ask the butler. He served me." The butler, standing discreetly by the door, nodded affirmation when Graves glanced his way. Poirot paced slowly, his patent leather shoes clicking on the floor. "A grudge, then. Most interesting. Mademoiselle Thorne, as secretary, you handled the manuscript. Did you notice these annotations?" Clara adjusted her spectacles, her voice soft but clear. "Yes, Monsieur Poirot. I typed the initial draft from Elias's sketches, but he added those notes by hand, late last night. He seemed agitated, pacing the study, muttering about old ghosts. I offered to help, but he dismissed me." "Old ghosts," Poirot repeated. "The shadow from the past, perhaps." "And your feelings for the maestro, were they purely professional?" Clara's flush deepened. "I admired him greatly. He was brilliant, but nothing more." Poirot nodded, then addressed Dr. Lang. "Doctor, as a musicologist you appreciate ciphers. Have you decoded further?" Lang uncrossed his legs, his expression impassive. "I've glanced at it. The cipher is rudimentary, notes as letters, with sharps shifting up a semitone, equivalent to advancing the alphabet. But beyond the warning, it seems incomplete. Voss might have intended more." "And your connection to Voss?" Poirot pressed. Lang's scar twitched slightly. "Professional. We corresponded on cryptology in music. He invited me to decipher this, no more." The interrogations continued, Poirot weaving questions like threads in a tapestry. He probed alibis. Lydia had stepped out to instruct the servants. Adrian claimed a brief visit to the lavatory. Kline had wandered the hall. Clara fetched extra scores. Lang remained seated. Each account overlapped, yet left gaps. Moments unaccounted for, where poison could have been slipped. Hastings interjected during a lull. "Poirot, the cyanide, where from?" "It's not common household fare." "Precisely, mon ami," Poirot replied. "Inspector Graves, have your men searched?" Graves grunted. "Greenhouse has rat poison, cyanide-based, vial missing, footprints in the soil, but muddied." Eyes turned suspiciously. Kline shifted uncomfortably. "I admired the plants earlier, orchids, fascinating. But I took nothing. A red herring, perhaps," Poirot thought. He examined the manuscript again, turning pages carefully. The cipher extended. After "Beware the shadow from the past," faint pencil marks suggested "It returns to claim." Incomplete. Tantalizing. Lydia broke the silence. "Elias had debts. Composers live extravagantly. Perhaps a creditor?" Adrian nodded eagerly. He mentioned financial woes. But Poirot waved it aside for now. "Motives abound. Jealousy, revenge, greed. We must dig deeper." As the morning wore on, tensions rose. Accusations flew. Adrian eyed Lydia warily. Kline glared at all. Clara whispered defenses. Poirot observed, his mind composing the puzzle. Finally, he declared a break. "We reconvene later. Do not leave the manor." Alone with Hastings, Poirot mused. The warning is key. The shadow, a person, a secret. The gray cells work. The interrogations had begun, unveiling layers, but the core remained hidden in shadows. Chapter 4. Clues and Alibis. The morning mist had burned away, leaving Voss Manor bathed in a pale autumnal light that streamed through the drawing-room's tall windows, illuminating motes of dust that danced like errant notes in an unfinished score. The air carried the faint tang of wood smoke from the fireplace, now reduced to glowing embers, and the lingering aroma of coffee, grown cold in the cups scattered among the guests. The opulent chamber, with its brocade settees and gilt-framed portraits, felt stifling despite its grandeur, as if the weight of suspicion had settled into the very walls. Hercule Poirot, his gray suit pristine and his mustache a model of precision, stood before a mahogany writing desk, where he had spread out a few items collected from the crime scene: the tainted sherry glass, a crumpled napkin, and a single page from the manuscript, carefully preserved under Inspector Graves's watchful eye. Captain Arthur Hastings, ever the loyal aide, paced nearby, his brow furrowed as he clutched his notebook, its pages already crowded with hurried scribbles. "This is a devilish puzzle, Poirot," he muttered, glancing at the assembled suspects, who sat in uneasy silence. Cyanide in the sherry, a cryptic message in the music, and all these people with reasons to dislike Voss. Where do we start? Poirot's green eyes gleamed with quiet intensity. "We start, mon ami, with the facts. The poison was in the sherry, yes, but how it arrived there, and why, requires the meticulous arrangement of clues, like notes in a symphony. Let us search the maestro's study. It may hold the key to his final composition, Inspector Graves, a solid figure in a tweed suit that strained slightly at the buttons, nodded approval. My men are combing the grounds, but the study's a good idea. Voss spent hours there. I'll have the butler unlock it. The group was permitted to remain in the drawing-room under the watchful eye of a young constable, while Poirot and Hastings followed the butler, a stoic man named Reynolds, to the study at the far end of the manor's west wing. The corridor was lined with tapestries depicting pastoral scenes, their colors faded, but their threads still vibrant with history. The study itself was a sanctuary of creativity and chaos. A heavy oak desk dominated the room, strewn with manuscripts, ink bottles, and quills. Shelves groaned under the weight of musical tomes, their spines cracked from frequent use. A window overlooked the misty gardens, where a gardener could be seen raking leaves, oblivious to the tragedy within. Poirot's gaze swept the room, cataloguing details with the precision of a metronome. "Observe, Hastings," he said, pointing to a stack of letters tied with twine, half hidden beneath a pile of scores. "Correspondence may reveal motives. And here," he lifted a small leather-bound journal, its pages filled with Voss's spidery handwriting. A diary, perhaps, of the maestro's thoughts. Hastings peered over his shoulder as Poirot opened the journal to a recent entry, dated 2 days prior. The words were cryptic. "The shadow looms closer. I must encode the truth, lest it be lost. The symphony will speak when I cannot." Poirot's mustache twitched. "Most intriguing. The shadow again. This is no mere metaphor." As Hastings rifled through the letters, he unearthed one that made him pause. "Look at this, Poirot. It's from Dr. Lang, dated a month ago." He read aloud, "Elias, your betrayal in Vienna cannot be forgotten. I know the truth of your success. Meet me, or face consequences." The signature was a bold flourish, and the paper bore creases, as if it had been read and reread. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "A threat, oui. Lang mentioned a professional connection, but this suggests a deeper wound. We shall question him further." Their search yielded more. A photograph tucked into a drawer, showing a younger Voss with a woman who resembled Lydia, but was not her, perhaps a former lover. A receipt for a substantial bank withdrawal, dated a week ago, hinted at financial strain. And, most curiously, a small vial labeled prussic acid in a locked cabinet, its contents intact, but suggesting Voss's access to cyanide. "Not the murder weapon," Poirot murmured, "but it confirms he knew of such poisons." Returning to the drawing-room, Poirot summoned Dr. Felix Lang for a private word near the grand piano, out of earshot but within sight of the others. Lang's gaunt frame seemed to absorb the light, his scar catching the sun as he faced Poirot with a cool gaze. "Doctor," Poirot began, his voice low and precise, "you wrote to Voss of a betrayal in Vienna." What was this? Lang's lips thinned, but he answered steadily. "A youthful indiscretion. 20 years ago, Voss accused me of forging a manuscript, a lost Mozart score. It was a lie to discredit me, to secure a patron's favor for himself. My career suffered, but I rebuilt it. I came here to confront him, yes, but also to reconcile. Killing him would serve no purpose. And this letter?" Poirot produced the creased paper, watching Lang's reaction. Lang's scar twitched. "Mere bluster. I wrote in anger but meant no harm. You'll find no cyanide on me." Poirot nodded, dismissing him for now, and called Clara Thorne. The secretary approached, her notebook clutched like a shield. "Mademoiselle," Poirot said gently, "you typed the manuscript." "Did you notice when Voss added these annotations?" Clara adjusted her spectacles, her voice soft but clear. "Yes, Monsieur Poirot." It was late Thursday night, in the study. He was frantic, scribbling by hand, muttering about making it right. I offered to assist, but he sent me away. He seemed frightened, not himself. "Frightened of what?" Poirot pressed. Clara hesitated, glancing at Lydia, who was watching intently. "I don't know." "He mentioned old debts and someone watching. I thought it was the strain of the premiere." Poirot filed this away, turning to the group. "Mesdames et messieurs, the greenhouse has yielded a clue, a missing vial of cyanide-based rat poison. Monsieur Kline, you were seen there yesterday." "Explain." Bertram Kline's beard bristled as he leaned forward, his eyes flashing. "I told you I was admiring the orchids. Voss bragged about his collection, so I took a look. I didn't touch any vials, and I wasn't near the sherry. Ask the gardener. He saw me leave the gardener, summoned by Inspector Graves, confirmed Kline's brief visit, but noted he had lingered near the storage shed. A red herring, perhaps, but Poirot noted Kline's defensiveness. "Very well," he said. "We shall verify further." Next, Poirot addressed Lydia Voss. "Madame, you mentioned infidelities. Were any recent, perhaps involving someone here?" Lydia's hands tightened in her lap, her violet eyes flashing. "You're prying, Monsieur Poirot." "Yes, there were rumors, always rumors, but no one specific. Elias was distracted lately, that's all." Hastings whispered to Poirot, "She's hiding something." That glance at Hale earlier, it was telling. Poirot nodded subtly, then turned to Adrian Hale. "Monsieur Hale, you argued with Voss over co-authorship. Were there other disputes?" Adrian's cufflinks clicked as he fidgeted. "Just the usual, artistic differences. He was stubborn, but I respected him. I was in the drawing room when the sherry was poured, nowhere near the decanter." Poirot's gaze lingered on the young man's nervous hands. "And the manuscript? Did you study these annotations?" "Only briefly," Adrian admitted. "I thought they were mistakes at first, but Voss said they were intentional. A game, he called it." The interrogations continued, each suspect offering alibis that overlapped yet left gaps. Lydia had been with servants, Adrian in conversation, Kline wandering, Clara fetching scores, Lang seated but briefly absent to retrieve a handkerchief. Poirot's mind worked, piecing together timelines and motives. Inspector Graves reported a new find, a smudged footprint near the greenhouse, size 8, possibly a woman's. Lydia's shoes were that size, Poirot recalled, but so were Clara's. Another clue, or another distraction? Returning to the manuscript, Poirot traced the cipher again. "Beware the shadow from the past. It returns to claim." The words haunted him. A past wrong, perhaps, he mused aloud. But whose? Hastings scratched his head. This shadow business, it's vague. Could it be a creditor, like Lydia suggested? "Perhaps," Poirot replied, "but the cipher feels personal. Voss encoded it for a reason. We must search his past, letters, records, enemies." As noon approached, Poirot dismissed the group to their rooms, under strict orders not to leave the manor. Alone with Hastings and Graves, he said, "The clues multiply, but so do the lies. The greenhouse vial, the threatening letter, the photograph, the cipher, all threads in a tapestry. We must weave them carefully. Graves grunted. I'm betting on Kline. That lawsuit gave him motive, and he was near the poison. Poirot smiled enigmatically. Patience, Inspector. Alibis are like melodies. Some harmonize, others clash. The truth lies in the discord. The study's secrets had begun to surface, but the heart of the mystery remained elusive, hidden in the shadows of Voss's past. Chapter 5. Midnight Discovery. The moon hung low over Voss Manor, its pale light filtering through the heavy drapes of the library, casting long, wavering shadows across the oak-paneled walls. The room was a sanctuary of knowledge, its shelves laden with leather-bound volumes on music theory, history, and literature, their gilt titles gleaming faintly in the gloom. A massive fireplace stood cold and silent, its hearth swept clean, and the air held a chill that seeped into the bones, mingling with the faint mustiness of old books and the lingering scent of beeswax polish. The manor had settled into an uneasy quiet after the day's interrogations, the guests confined to their rooms under the watchful eyes of Inspector Graves's constables, who patrolled the corridors with the diligence of sentinels. Yet, beneath this stillness, tension simmered, a discordant note waiting to erupt. Hercule Poirot, unable to sleep, had slipped from his guest room, his patent leather shoes silent on the thick carpets as he made his way to the library. His mind, ever active, churned with the day's findings. The cryptic cipher in Voss's manuscript, the missing cyanide vial, the threatening letter from Lang, and the subtle undercurrents of jealousy and ambition among the suspects. The little gray cells, they demand clarity, he murmured to himself, adjusting his silk dressing-gown over his pajamas. And clarity comes in the quiet of the night. Captain Arthur Hastings, roused by Poirot's soft knock, joined him, his hair disheveled and his eyes heavy with fatigue. Really, Poirot, it's past midnight, he grumbled, stifling a yawn. Can't the mystery wait till morning? Non, mon ami, Poirot replied, his voice low but firm. The night, it reveals what the day conceals. The library, Voss spent many hours here. Perhaps it holds secrets, yet uncovered. They had just begun to examine a cluttered desk, strewn with musical journals and half-written letters, when a piercing scream shattered the silence, echoing through the manor's cavernous halls. Hastings froze, his hand on a volume of Bach's fugues. Good Lord, what was that? Poirot's eyes gleamed in the moonlight. Quickly, Hastings! To the source. They hurried from the library, following the sound down the west wing corridor, where gas lamps flickered dimly, casting eerie shadows. The scream had come from the direction of the grand staircase, and as they reached it, they saw a figure slumped at the foot of a bookcase in the hallway, illuminated by a single lamp. It was Adrian Hale, his auburn hair matted with sweat, his evening suit disheveled. He clutched the manuscript of Symphony No. 7 to his chest, its pages crumpled in his grip. His eyes fluttered open as Poirot knelt beside him, and he groaned. Someone attacked me. They wanted this. Poirot's gaze swept the scene, noting a faint smudge of dust on the floor, disturbed as if by a scuffle, and a single footprint, small, size 8, like those found near the greenhouse. "Calm yourself, Monsieur Hale," he said, his voice soothing yet authoritative. "You are unharmed, oui? Tell me exactly what happened." Adrian struggled to sit up, his hands trembling as he gripped the manuscript. I couldn't sleep. I came to the library to look at the score again. I thought I could decipher more of the cipher. Then, out of nowhere, someone hit me from behind. I didn't see them, just felt the blow. They tried to grab the manuscript, but I held on, and they fled when I shouted. Hastings, peering into the shadows, clutched a fireplace poker he'd grabbed en route. Dash it all, Poirot, they could still be here. Should we search? Poirot raised a hand, his expression calm but alert. No, Hastings, the attacker is likely gone, but the scene, it speaks. Observe, the footprint. It matches those near the greenhouse. A woman's shoe, perhaps, or a small man's. And the manuscript. Why such desperation to seize it? Inspector Graves arrived, summoned by a servant roused by the scream, his tweed coat thrown hastily over pajamas. "What's this now?" he demanded, his mustache bristling. "Another attack?" "This place is a madhouse," Poirot briefed him swiftly, then turned back to Adrian. "Monsieur, you say you came to study the cipher. Had you discovered anything new?" Adrian hesitated, his eyes darting to the manuscript. "Not much. I was trying to extend the cipher, those notes Voss added. They seemed to form another phrase, but I was interrupted before I could finish." Poirot carefully took the manuscript, noting a new tear on one page as if it had been yanked forcefully. "We shall examine it later. For now, Monsieur Hale, you must rest under guard. Inspector, please ensure he is escorted to his room." As a constable helped Adrian away, Poirot and Hastings returned to the library, where the desk now bore signs of disturbance, a drawer slightly ajar, a few papers scattered. Poirot's keen eyes spotted a faint smudge of lipstick on the edge of a letter, barely noticeable in the dim light. "Interesting," he murmured, slipping the letter into his pocket for later analysis. Hastings scratched his head. Who'd attack Hale for the manuscript? And why now, after Voss is already dead? "The manuscript holds the key," Poirot replied, his voice low. "It is not merely music. It is a confession, a warning, or perhaps an accusation. Someone fears its secrets." The commotion had roused the other suspects, who gathered in the drawing room, summoned by Graves. Lydia Voss, wrapped in a silk shawl over her nightdress, looked pale and agitated. "What's happened now?" she demanded, her voice sharp. "Are we all to be attacked in our beds?" Bertram Kline, bleary-eyed and clutching a flask, muttered, "This is Voss's doing, even from the grave." Always stirring trouble, Clara Thorne, her hair loose and, her spectacles absent, clutched a shawl tightly around her shoulders. "Is Adrian all right?" I heard the scream. Dr. Felix Lang, impeccably composed despite the hour, leaned against the doorframe, his scar stark in the lamplight. "The manuscript again," he said coolly. "It seems to attract violence." Poirot addressed them with quiet authority. "Mesdames et messieurs, an attempt was made to steal the manuscript from Monsieur Hale. The attacker left a footprint, size 8, like that found near the greenhouse. Madame Voss, Mademoiselle Thorne, your shoes are of this size, oui?" Lydia's eyes flashed. "How dare you, Monsieur Poirot?" "I was in my room, unable to sleep, walking the grounds earlier, but I didn't come near the library. You can ask the night maid. She saw me outside." Clara's cheeks flushed. "I was asleep until the scream woke me." "I haven't left my room all night." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "And you, Monsieur Kline?" "Monsieur Lang?" Kline shrugged, his flask glinting. "I was drinking in my room. Alone. No need for manuscripts. I've got my own scores to worry about. Lang's lips curved slightly. I was reading. The library's too crowded for my taste at midnight. Hastings whispered to Poirot, "That footprint, it's a woman's, I'd wager. Lydia or Clara? Or a clever ruse," Poirot replied softly. "We must not assume. Let us examine the manuscript now." Under Graves' supervision, Poirot spread the score on a table, its pages illuminated by a gas lamp. The ciphered notes stood out starkly, sharps, flats, and rests, forming the message, "Beware the shadow from the past. It returns to claim." But Adrian's claim of a new phrase intrigued Poirot. He traced a later section where faint pencil marks suggested additional annotations. "We, here," he murmured. "The notes continue. Perhaps what was taken, but it is incomplete." Graves rubbed his chin. "Sounds like Voss was pointing fingers. But at who?" Poirot's mustache twitched. "Or confessing his own sins. We must uncover this shadow. Perhaps a person. Perhaps a deed." A new clue emerged when a constable reported finding a silk scarf embroidered with the initials LV near the library door. Lydia paled when shown it. "It's mine, yes, but I lost it yesterday, during the day, in the garden. Anyone could have picked it up. A red herring or damning evidence?" Poirot tucked the scarf into an evidence bag, his mind racing. "The attack on Hale suggests urgency," he told Hastings. "Someone fears the cipher's full revelation." "We must guard the manuscript closely." As the group dispersed, Poirot lingered, his gaze on the suspect's retreating figures. Lydia's agitation, Clara's nervousness, Kline's defiance, Lang's detachment, all were notes in a complex score. And Adrian's attack hinted at a deeper motive, perhaps tied to the symphony's secrets. Back in the library, Poirot examined the smudged letter, the lipstick faint but distinct. A shade of coral, he noted, matching Lydia's makeup, but not Clara's. "A clue, Hastings," he said, "but clues can mislead. We must tread carefully." The night had yielded a new layer of mystery. The manuscript cipher, a siren call to danger. As the manor settled back into uneasy silence, Poirot knew the truth lay just out of reach, hidden in the shadows of Voss's past. Chapter 6. Unraveling Threads. The afternoon sun cast a golden haze over Voss Manor, its rays filtering through the leaded windows of the drawing-room, where dust motes swirled in lazy spirals, as if reluctant to settle in the wake of the previous night's chaos. The room, with its crimson drapes and brocade furnishings, retained its air of faded grandeur, but the atmosphere was thick with unease, like the heavy pause before a storm. The fireplace crackled softly, tended by a silent servant, its warmth doing little to dispel the chill of suspicion that clung to the gathered suspects. Hercule Poirot, his gray suit immaculate and his mustache a study in symmetry, stood before the group, his green eyes sharp with purpose. The manuscript of Symphony No. 7, now under lock and key in Inspector Graves' custody, loomed in his mind as the key to the mystery, its cryptic message a melody yet to be fully deciphered. Captain Arthur Hastings, nursing a cup of tea, stood by a window, his face etched with fatigue from the midnight disturbance. "Dash it all, Poirot," he muttered, low enough for only his friend to hear. "First a murder, now an attack on Hale. This place is a powder keg. What's next?" Poirot's lips curved slightly, though his gaze remained fixed on the suspects seated in a tense semicircle. "Next, mon ami, we unravel the threads." Each clue, the cipher, the footprint, the scarf, points to a motive, but the pattern is not yet clear. We must probe deeper into the hearts and histories of those here. Inspector Graves, his tweed suit rumpled from a night of overseeing constables, cleared his throat. We've searched Hale's room and the library again. No sign of the attacker, but that scarf with Mrs. Voss's initials, it's suspicious, and the footprint matches her shoes, though she denies being near the library. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. Merci, Inspector. Let us proceed with care. Motives multiply, but the truth lies in the details. We shall begin with the relationships, those ties of love, loyalty, and betrayal that bind this group to the late Maestro Lydia Voss sat rigidly, her black mourning dress absorbing the light, her violet eyes flickering with a mix of grief and defiance. She clutched a lace handkerchief, though her hands were steady now, belying her earlier theatrics. Adrian Hale, his head bandaged from the attack, sat with a forced calm, his fingers still on his cufflinks for once, though his gaze darted nervously. Bertram Kline slouched, his bearded face set in a scowl, a fresh glass of whiskey in hand despite the hour. Clara Thorne, her spectacles glinting, clutched her notebook, her posture prim but her eyes betraying anxiety. Dr. Felix Lang leaned back, his gaunt frame relaxed, his scar stark against his pale skin, as he observed the room with clinical detachment. Poirot paced slowly, his patent leather shoes clicking softly on the parquet. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice a measured cadence, "the attack on Monsieur Hale last night suggests that the manuscript cipher is more than a game. It holds a truth someone wishes to suppress. Let us explore the connections to Maestro Voss, for in these ties we find motives he turned to Lydia first. Madame Voss, you spoke of your husband's infidelities. Were any among those present? Speak plainly, for time is short." Lydia's lips tightened, and she glanced at Adrian, then away. "I told you, Monsieur Poirot, there were rumors, singers, admirers, but no one specific here. Elias was distant lately, consumed by his work. If there was someone, he kept it from me." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And yet, your scarf was found near the library. You claim it was lost in the garden. Can anyone confirm this?" A servant, a young maid named Ellen, was summoned. She fidgeted, her apron crisp, but her eyes nervous. "Yes, sir," she said softly. "I saw Mrs. Voss in the garden yesterday afternoon near the rose beds. She was upset, pacing. I didn't see the scarf, though Lydia nodded eagerly. I told you I lost it there. Anyone could have taken it." Poirot filed this away, turning to Adrian. "Monsieur Hale, you were attacked for the manuscript. Why do you think it is so coveted?" Adrian's bandaged head tilted slightly, his voice strained. "I don't know, Monsieur Poirot. I was trying to decipher it. Those extra notes Voss added, I thought they might point to, well, something about his debts or enemies. He'd been secretive, even with me." "And your argument over co-authorship?" Poirot pressed. "Was it only artistic?" Adrian hesitated, his eyes flicking to Lydia again. "Mostly. He promised me credit, then changed his mind, said the symphony was his legacy, not mine. It stung, but I didn't want him dead." Poirot noted the glance, suspecting a deeper connection. He shifted to Bertram Kline. "Monsieur Kline, your lawsuit against Voss was a bitter affair. Did it end there, or did resentment linger?" Kline's scowl deepened, his whiskey glass clinking as he set it down. "It never ends, Poirot. Voss ruined me, took my melody, my reputation. But I'm no murderer. I was in my room last night, drinking, not skulking about attacking protégés. Poirot's mustache twitched. And the greenhouse? Your visit there. Orchids, you said. Yet the cyanide vial is missing. Kline's eyes flashed. I told you, I looked at the plants. I didn't go near any shed. You're barking up the wrong tree. The gardener recalled, confirmed Kline's presence, but added, He lingered a bit near the shed door. Didn't see him go in, mind a red herring perhaps, but Poirot pressed on, turning to Clara Thorne. Mademoiselle, you loved the maestro, did you not? More than a secretary should. Clara's cheeks flushed, her spectacles slipping as she pushed them up. I admired him, yes, his genius, his passion. But I would never harm him. I was in my room last night, asleep until the scream. Poirot's gaze softened, but his question was sharp. And the manuscript, you typed it, saw his fear. Did he confide anything about this shadow from the past? Clara shook her head, her voice trembling. Only that he had to make things right. He was frantic, scribbling those notes. I thought it was the pressure of the premiere. Finally, Poirot addressed Dr. Lang. Doctor, your letter spoke of betrayal. You claim reconciliation, but was there more? A shared history, perhaps? Lang's scar twitched, his gray eyes steady. More than I've said, yes. During the war, Voss and I served together briefly in a relief effort. He saved my life once, pulling me from a collapsed building, but later, in Vienna, he betrayed me over that forgery accusation. I forgave, but didn't forget. Still, murder? Number. I came to decode his cipher, not to end his life. Poirot nodded, his mind weaving connections. A complex history indeed. Let us consider new evidence. He produced a financial ledger found in Voss's study, showing the maestro was nearly bankrupt, his lavish lifestyle funded by loans. And this, he added, holding up a will dated a month ago, naming Adrian Hale as primary beneficiary of Voss's estate, including rights to his compositions. Adrian paled. I didn't know. He never told me. Lydia gasped, her handkerchief fluttering. That's absurd. Elias would never cut me out. Hastings whispered, Good grief, Poirot. That's motive for Hale, or Lydia, if she knew. Poirot raised a hand. Patience, Hastings. Motives, yes, but we must verify. He turned to the group. The cipher, beware the shadow from the past. It returns to claim what was taken, suggests a wrong Voss committed. We must uncover this wrong. Inspector Graves reported a new find. A servant had seen Bertram Kline near the sherry decanter before the premiere, contradicting his earlier claim of avoiding it. Kline blustered, I passed by, that's all. Didn't touch the stuff. Another thread unraveled. Lydia admitted to helping Clara hide Voss's affairs from the press, a pact to protect his reputation. It was for his legacy, Lydia insisted, while Clara nodded, her eyes downcast. Poirot's mind raced. The ledger, the will, the scarf, the footprint, all pointed to tangled motives. Was Lydia jealous of a rival? Did Adrian seek to claim the symphony? Was Kline's grudge deadly? Did Clara's love turn to betrayal? Or did Lang's past harbor a darker vendetta? As the interrogation ended, Poirot dismissed the group, retaining the ledger and will for further study. Alone with Hastings and Graves, he said, The web grows complex. Love, greed, revenge, each a note in this symphony of deceit. But the shadow remains elusive. Graves grunted, I'm still on Kline. That decanter business doesn't add up, Poirot. smiled enigmatically. "We shall see, Inspector. The truth is like a melody. It emerges when the discord resolves." The threads were unraveling, but the heart of the mystery lay deeper, in the shadows of Voss's past, waiting to be brought into the light. Chapter 7. Hidden Alliances. The late afternoon light filtered through the heavy drapes of Voss Manor's drawing room, casting a muted golden glow across the ornate furnishings, where shadows lingered like unspoken secrets. The air was heavy with the scent of old wood, fading flowers, and a faint trace of cigar smoke from Bertram Kline's ever-present vice. The crackle of the fireplace had dwindled to a soft hiss, and the room's opulence, its velvet upholstery, gilt mirrors, and crystal chandelier, seemed to mock the grim proceedings unfolding within. Hercule Poirot, his grey suit as pristine as ever, stood near the grand piano, his hands clasped behind his back, his mustache a perfect arc of deliberation. His green eyes, sharp and unyielding, surveyed the suspects with the precision of a conductor studying an orchestra before the first note. Captain Arthur Hastings, seated on a brocade settee, scribbled in his notebook, his face etched with frustration. "This case is a tangle, Poirot," he whispered, glancing at the group. "Hale's attack, the cipher, the scarf. Every clue points somewhere, but nowhere clear. Are we any closer?" Poirot's lips twitched in a faint smile. "Patience, mon ami. The threads of a mystery, they appear knotted, but with care they unravel. Today we explore the alliances, the hidden partnerships that bind these players. In such bonds, we find motives concealed. Inspector Graves, his tweed suit creased from hours of pacing, stood by the door, his mustache bristling as he conferred with a constable. "We've checked alibis again," he announced gruffly. "Hale's story holds. No one saw him leave his room before the library incident. But that scarf of Mrs. Voss's, it's troubling. And Kline's near the decanter? His story's shaky." Poirot nodded, his gaze sweeping the semicircle of suspects, each a study in tension. Lydia Voss, her black mourning dress stark against her pale skin, sat with her hands folded, her violet eyes darting warily. Adrian Hale, his head still bandaged, seemed subdued, his cufflinks untouched for once, though his fingers twitched restlessly. Bertram Kline slouched, his beard unkempt, a fresh cigar smoldering between his fingers. Clara Thorne, her spectacles glinting, clutched her notebook, her posture rigid as if braced for accusation. Dr. Felix Lang leaned against a bookcase, his gaunt frame relaxed, his scar catching the light as he observed with cool detachment. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice a measured cadence. "The murder of Maestro Voss and the attack on Monsieur Hale suggest a web of secrets, but secrets are rarely kept alone. There are alliances here, pacts, promises, perhaps betrayals. Let us uncover them." He turned first to Lydia Voss. "Madame, you admitted to concealing your husband's affairs with Mademoiselle Thorne's help. Why such loyalty to a man you claim betrayed you?" Lydia's lips tightened, her handkerchief twisting in her hands. "It was for his reputation, Monsieur Poirot. Elias was a genius, but scandal could ruin him. Clara and I, we agreed to keep the rumors quiet. It was a practical arrangement, nothing more." Clara nodded, her voice soft. "Mrs. Voss asked me to intercept letters, to manage the press. I did it for the maestro's legacy." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And yet, Mademoiselle Thorne, your devotion to Voss was more than professional, no? Did this pact with Madame Voss extend to other secrets? Clara's cheeks flushed, her spectacles slipping. No. I cared for him, yes, but I wouldn't harm him. Our agreement was only about his public image. Poirot filed this away, turning to Adrian Hale. Monsieur Hale, you and Monsieur Kline were seen sharing a drink the night before the premiere, discussing overthrowing the old guard. An alliance, perhaps? Adrian's eyes widened, his bandage shifting slightly. It was just talk. Bertram and we complained about Voss's dominance, how he overshadowed us. It wasn't serious, just frustration over drinks. Kline snorted, exhaling a plume of cigar smoke. Speak for yourself, lad. I meant every word. Voss was a tyrant in the music world, hogging the spotlight. But plotting murder? That's a stretch. Poirot's mustache twitched. And yet, Monsieur Kline, your presence near the sherry decanter contradicts your claim of avoiding it. A servant saw you linger there before the performance. Kline's scowl deepened. I passed by, looking for whiskey. Didn't touch the sherry. You've got nothing on me. A constable confirmed the servant's account, adding that Kline had seemed agitated, muttering to himself. Poirot noted this, his mind weaving connections. He turned to Dr. Lang. Doctor, you and Voss shared a wartime bond, yet also a betrayal. Were there others you confided in here? Perhaps Monsieur Hale, who also sought to decipher the manuscript? Lang's scar twitched, his gray eyes steady. No alliances, Monsieur Poirot. I came alone to study the cipher. Voss's past with me is just that, past. I shared nothing with Hale or anyone, Poirot paced, his shoes clicking softly. Let us consider a new clue. He produced a torn page from the manuscript, found in Lang's room during a discreet search by Graves's men. This, Doctor, was under your pillow. Explain. Lang's composure faltered briefly, his hand brushing his scar. I found it slipped under my door yesterday morning, before the premiere. I thought it was a taunt, someone playing games. I kept it to study the annotations. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A taunt or evidence planted? The page contains part of the cipher. What was taken? Who would want you implicated? Lang shrugged. Any of them? Voss had enemies. I was one once, but I didn't kill him. A new discovery heightened the tension. A poison-laced pen, its inkwell containing traces of cyanide, was found in Clara's desk during a search of her room. Clara gasped, her notebook falling to her lap. It's not mine. I swear I never saw it before. Lydia's eyes flashed. How convenient, Clara. Were you jealous of Elias's attentions? Did you want more than his gratitude? Clara's voice rose, trembling. That's absurd. I loved him, yes, but I'd never harm him. Poirot raised a hand, calming the room. Enough. The pen is a clue, but perhaps a distraction. Let us examine motives further. The will naming Monsieur Hale beneficiary. Did you know, Madame Voss? Lydia's face hardened. I suspected he'd changed it. Elias was reckless with money, borrowing against future royalties. But I didn't know it was Adrian until yesterday. Adrian protested. I told you I had no idea. Voss never mentioned it. Poirot turned to the financial ledger, its pages revealing Voss's mounting debts. The maestro was bankrupt, yet lived lavishly. Did anyone here lend him money or know of his creditors? Silence fell, broken only by Kline's gruff laugh. Voss owed half of London. I heard he borrowed from shady types, loan sharks, not banks. Graves interjected, We're looking into that. found a note in Voss's study, unsigned, demanding repayment of £10,000. No names, though. Poirot's mind raced. The alliances, Lydia and Clara's pact, Hale and Kline's shared grievances, Lang's solitary grudge, formed a web of deceit. The pen, the torn page, the will, all suggested someone was orchestrating distractions, planting evidence to muddy the waters. He addressed the group. The cipher. Beware the shadow from the past. It returns to claim what was taken, points to a wrong Voss committed. But who is the shadow? A jilted lover? A wronged colleague? Or something deeper? Hastings whispered, "What about Lang's wartime story? Saving his life, then betraying him. Sounds personal." "Oui," Poirot replied softly, "but all here have personal stakes. We must dig into Voss's past, his loves, his enemies." As the group dispersed for a late lunch, under strict orders to remain in the manor, Poirot lingered with Hastings and Graves. "The alliances reveal much," he said. "Lydia and Clara protect Voss's image, yet hide their own feelings. Hale and Kline resent his success, yet share no trust. Lang stands alone, but his past with Voss is a shadow itself." Graves rubbed his chin. "That pen in Clara's desk, it's damning. And Lydia's scarf. I'm leaning toward one of them." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Beware the obvious, Inspector. The web is spun to deceive. The truth lies in the spaces between these alliances." The investigation deepened, each clue a thread pulling tighter. But the shadow from Voss's past remained elusive, its form just beyond reach. Chapter 8. The False Trail. The evening shadows lengthened across Voss Manor, creeping over the manicured lawns and seeping into the grand drawing-room, where the flickering glow of gas lamps battled the encroaching dusk. The room, with its crimson drapes, gilt mirrors, and brocade furnishings, seemed to tighten under the weight of accumulated secrets, the air thick with the scent of wax, old books, and the faint tang of Bertram Kline's cigar smoke. The fireplace, newly stoked, cast a warm but unsteady light, its crackle a counterpoint to the tense silence among the suspects. Hercule Poirot, his gray suit as immaculate as ever, stood before the gathered group, his mustache a perfect crescent, his green eyes gleaming with the intensity of a maestro poised to conduct a critical movement. The manuscript of Symphony No. 7, now locked in a police safe, remained the silent heart of the mystery, its cipher a haunting melody yet to be fully resolved. Captain Arthur Hastings, seated near a window overlooking the darkening gardens, shifted uneasily, his notebook open, but his pen idle. "This is maddening, Poirot," he whispered, his voice low to avoid the suspect's ears. "We've got footprints, scarves, poisoned pens, and that blasted cipher, but it's all pointing in circles. Are we chasing shadows?" Poirot's lips curved in a faint, enigmatic smile. "Not shadows, mon ami, but a trail, deliberately laid to mislead. The murderer weaves a false path, planting clues to obscure the truth. Tonight we shall test this trail, and in doing so uncover what lies beneath Inspector Graves, his tweed suit creased from days of relentless investigation, stood by the door, his mustache twitching as he reviewed a report from his constable. "We've traced that unsigned note about the £10,000 debt," he announced gruffly. "No leads yet. Could be a loan shark, as Kline suggested, but no name. And the pen in Miss Thorne's desk tested positive for cyanide traces, same as the sherry. It's looking bad for her." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "Merci, Inspector, but evidence, it can be a siren, luring us to false conclusions. Let us test the motives and alibis once more with a reconstruction of the fatal premiere. It will illuminate the discord in this symphony of deceit. The suspects, summoned from their rooms, sat in a tense semicircle, their faces etched with weariness and suspicion. Lydia Voss, her black mourning dress stark against her pale skin, clutched a fresh handkerchief, her violet eyes guarded. Adrian Hale, his bandage fresh, but his demeanor subdued, sat with his hands clasped, no longer fidgeting with his cufflinks. Bertram Kline, his beard bristling, puffed on a cigar, his scowl deepening with each passing moment. Clara Thorne, her spectacles glinting in the lamplight, held her notebook tightly, her posture rigid as if bracing for a storm. Dr. Felix Lang leaned against a bookcase, his gaunt frame relaxed, his scar catching the light as he observed with clinical detachment. Poirot clapped his hand sharply, drawing attention. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice a measured cadence. "The murder of Maestro Voss occurred during his premiere in this very manner. The cyanide was in his sherry, but the manuscript cipher, beware the shadow from the past, it returns to claim what was taken, suggests a deeper motive. Tonight we recreate the moments before his death to test your accounts and uncover the false trail." He gestured to the salon, where the small ensemble of musicians, a string quartet and pianist, had been summoned to replay the opening of Symphony No. 7. The room was arranged as it had been, with chairs facing the raised platform, the sherry decanter, and glasses replaced with replicas to avoid contamination. "Each of you will take your place as you were that night," Poirot instructed. "We shall observe the movements, the opportunities." The suspects complied reluctantly, taking their seats. Lydia stood near the decanter table as she had poured the drinks. Adrian sat near the front as Voss's protégé. Kline slouched at the back, as he had claimed. Clara hovered near the platform, her notebook mimicking her role of organizing scores. Lang sat in the middle, his posture unchanged from his earlier account. The musicians began, the haunting melody of the symphony filling the room, its notes laced with the discordant annotations Poirot had studied. He watched closely as Lydia mimed pouring sherry, her movements precise, but her eyes darting nervously. Adrian shifted in his seat, his gaze fixed on the imaginary podium. Kline fidgeted, his cigar replaced by a pencil, he twirled irritably. Clara adjusted her spectacles, her hands trembling slightly. Lang remained still, his gray eyes scanning the room. As the music reached the moment of Voss's collapse, Poirot halted the ensemble with a raised hand. "Here, the maestro fell. The sherry was poisoned moments before. Madame Voss, you poured the drinks. Did anyone approach the decanter?" Lydia's voice was sharp. "No one, Monsieur Poirot." I poured, set the tray down, and stepped away to greet guests. The decanter was untouched, but a servant, Ellen, hesitated when questioned. I saw Mr. Kline pass by the table, ma'am," she said softly, "just before the performance." He looked at the decanter, then moved on. Kline's face reddened. "I told you I was looking for whiskey." I didn't touch the blasted sherry. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Monsieur Kline, your grudge against Voss, plagiarism, a ruined career, gives you motive. The greenhouse vial, your presence near the decanter, and now this testimony. It points to you." The room tensed, all eyes on Kline. He surged to his feet, his cigar falling to the floor. "This is outrageous." Yes, I hated Voss. He stole my work, my future. But I didn't poison him. You've got no proof. Poirot's voice was calm but piercing. Sit, Monsieur Kline. Let us test this further. He turned to the group, his tone deliberate. The cipher suggests a shadow from the past. Monsieur Kline, was there more to your history with Voss? A secret you've concealed? Kline's eyes widened, his bluster faltering. What are you implying? Poirot paced, his shoes clicking softly. In Voss's study, I found a letter, not sent, addressed to you. It speaks of a debt beyond money, a truth I cannot face. What truth, Monsieur Kline? Kline's face crumpled, and he sank back into his chair, his voice low. All right, damn you. Voss, he was my half-brother, illegitimate from our father's affair. He knew, but never acknowledged me. I wanted recognition, not his death. I confronted him years ago, before the lawsuit. He laughed it off, said I was nothing to him. Gasps filled the room. Lydia's handkerchief fluttered to the floor. Elias had a brother? She whispered. Adrian's jaw dropped. You never said. Clara's spectacles slipped, her eyes wide. Lang's scar twitched, but he remained silent. Poirot nodded, his expression grave. A secret indeed. Your motive, Monsieur Kline, was not just revenge, but a longing for family. Yet you claim innocence. The trail points to you, but is it false? Kline's voice broke. I swear I didn't kill him. I wanted his respect, not his blood. Hastings whispered, Good Lord, Poirot? His brother? That's a bombshell, but does it clear him? Poirot's eyes twinkled. No, Hastings, but it shifts the melody. Kline's secret was a red herring laid to distract. The true killer used his grudge to frame him. Graves rubbed his chin. Then who? The pen points to Clara, the scarf to Lydia, and Hale's attack. Someone's desperate. Poirot addressed the group. The reconstruction reveals much. The decanter was accessible, yes, but the poison required opportunity and intent. The cipher, it returns to claim what was taken, suggests a theft, perhaps of love, honor, or legacy. We must look closer at Voss's past. He turned to Lang. Doctor, your wartime bond with Voss, saving your life, then betraying you. Was there a woman involved, perhaps the one in the photograph we found? Lang's composure flickered. Yes, a singer, Anna, in Vienna. Voss and I both loved her. He spread the forgery lie to ruin me, and she left with him. But she died years ago. It's old history. Poirot nodded, filing this away. Old history, yet the shadow returns. We shall see. As the group dispersed, under orders to remain in the manor, Poirot lingered with Hastings and Graves. The false trail is clear, he said. Kline's secret was meant to mislead, as was the pen in Clara's desk, the scarf near the library. Someone orchestrates this chaos. Graves grunted. Clara's looking guiltier by the minute. That pen's no accident. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. The pen, the scarf, they are notes in a false score. The true killer hides behind them, but the cipher will sing the truth. The reconstruction had cleared one path, revealing Kline's hidden bond, but the shadow from Voss's past loomed larger, its form still veiled in the manor's deepening shadows. Chapter 9. Gathering the Suspects. The grand salon of Voss Manor, where only 2 nights ago Elias Voss had conducted his ill-fated Symphony No. 7, was now a stage for revelation. The late afternoon light filtered through the tall leaded windows, casting intricate patterns across the mahogany-paneled walls, where shadows danced like the ghosts of unresolved notes. The candelabra, relit for the occasion, flickered with an unsteady glow, their flames reflected in the polished surfaces of the room's few remaining furnishings, a scattering of chairs arranged in a semicircle, a small table holding a replica of the fatal sherry decanter, and the podium, now empty save for a single sheet of music, a copy of the manuscript's ciphered page. The air was heavy with the scent of wax, the faint musk of old wood, and a lingering tension that seemed to hum like a taut violin string. Hercule Poirot, his gray suit immaculate and his mustache a model of symmetry, stood at the center of the room, his small stature commanding the space with the authority of a maestro. His green eyes, sharp and unyielding, surveyed the assembled suspects, each seated with varying degrees of unease. Captain Arthur Hastings stood near the door, his notebook clutched tightly, his face a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. Inspector Graves, his tweed suit creased from days of relentless investigation, leaned against a wall, his mustache twitching as he awaited Poirot's next move. The constables stood guard at the exits, ensuring no one could slip away. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice a clear, resonant cadence that silenced the room's murmurs. "We gather once more to unravel the mystery of Maestro Elias Voss's murder, the cyanide in his sherry, the attack on Monsieur Hale, the cryptic message in the manuscript. These are notes in a symphony of deceit, but now the little gray cells of Hercule Poirot have composed the truth. The cipher, it is not merely a warning, it is a confession." Gasps rippled through the room. Lydia Voss, her black mourning dress absorbing the light, sat rigidly, her violet eyes wide with alarm. Adrian Hale, his bandage a stark white against his auburn hair, leaned forward, his hands clenched. Bertram Kline, his beard bristling, gripped a fresh cigar, unlit, as if it were a talisman against accusation. Clara Thorne, her spectacles glinting, clutched her notebook, her knuckles white. Dr. Felix Lang, gaunt and composed, sat with his legs crossed, his scar catching the candlelight as he watched with an air of detached curiosity. Poirot paced slowly, his patent leather shoes clicking on the polished floor. The manuscript cipher. Beware the shadow from the past. It returns to claim what was taken. We thought it a warning from Voss to another. But non, it is Voss himself who speaks. The full message, decoded with care, reads, "Beware the shadow from the past. It returns to claim what was taken. I am the impostor." The room erupted in murmurs. Hastings whispered, "Good Lord Poirot, an impostor? Voss?" Poirot raised a hand, silencing the chatter. "Oui, mes amis, let us unravel this web. The clues, the sherry, the scarf, the poisoned pen, the footprint, the will, were laid to mislead, but they point to a deeper truth. Voss was not all he seemed. Let us examine the motives and the past." He turned to Lydia. "Madame Voss, you concealed your husband's affairs, yet you knew of his financial ruin. Did you suspect he hid a greater secret?" Lydia's handkerchief twisted in her hands. "I knew he was troubled. Debts, yes, and his moods grew darker. But an impostor? That's absurd. He was Elias Voss, the genius." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And yet your scarf near the library, your glances at Monsieur Hale, suggest an alliance, perhaps an affair." Lydia's face flushed. "No, I cared for Adrian, yes, but as a friend. Elias was my husband despite his faults." Poirot nodded, turning to Adrian. Monsieur Hale, you were named beneficiary in Voss's will, a fact you claimed ignorance of. Yet you sought the manuscript, risking attack. Why? Adrian's voice was strained. I told you, I wanted to decipher the cipher, to honor Voss's work. I didn't know about the will until you found it. Poirot moved to Kline. Monsieur Kline, you revealed your kinship to Voss, his half-brother, unacknowledged. Your grudge was real, but was it murderous? Kline's cigar trembled. I hated him for denying me, but I didn't kill him. I wanted his respect, not his life. Poirot turned to Clara. Mademoiselle Thorne, the poisoned pen in your desk, your love for Voss, did it turn to betrayal when he spurned you? Clara's spectacles slipped, her voice trembling. Never. I loved him, yes, but I'd never harm him. That pen was planted, I swear it. Finally, Poirot addressed Lang. Doctor, your past with Voss, wartime comrade, then betrayed over a woman and a forgery. You found a torn page of the manuscript. Did you know its full meaning? Lang's scar twitched, his gray eyes steady. I suspected it was a cipher, but not that Voss called himself an impostor. My grudge was old, settled. Poirot paused, letting the tension build. The clues were distractions, the scarf, the pen, the footprint, all meant to point to others, but the cipher tells the truth. Voss encoded his confession. He was an impostor, not in music, but in identity. Let us consider his past. He produced the photograph from Voss's study, showing a younger Voss with a woman. This is Anna, the singer from Vienna, loved by both Voss and Dr. Lang. But there is more. Voss had a twin brother, Victor, presumed dead in the war. I propose that Elias Voss died years ago, and Victor assumed his identity, building a career on his brother's name. The room froze. Lydia gasped. Impossible. Adrian's jaw dropped. Kline's cigar fell to the floor. Clara's notebook slipped from her lap. Lang's eyes narrowed, but he remained silent. Poirot continued, his voice a crescendo. Victor, as Elias, encoded his guilt in the symphony, fearing exposure. The shadow from the past was his own deception, returning to haunt him. He planned a dramatic exit, poison in the sherry, a stage suicide to escape debts and enemies. But someone discovered his secret and turned his plan against him. Hastings whispered, "A twin? Poirot, that's incredible." Poirot's gaze swept the room. The poison was meant to be a small dose, enough for a spectacle, but it was swapped for a lethal one. Who knew of this imposture? Who had access to the sherry? He turned to Adrian. Monsieur Hale, you studied the manuscript closely. Did you decipher the impostor's confession? Adrian shook his head frantically. No. I saw the cipher but didn't understand it fully. I swear. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Someone did. The attack on you was to prevent further decoding. The scarf, the pen, these were planted to shift blame. But the truth lies in the cipher's final note. He paused, letting the suspense build. The killer is among us, one who knew Voss's secret and used it to orchestrate murder. But I shall reveal the name in due course. For now, reflect on your secrets, for they are no longer hidden. The suspects exchanged wary glances, the room thick with unspoken accusations. Graves muttered, "You're close, Poirot? But who?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "The final movement approaches, Inspector. The shadow will be named. The gathering had tightened the web, exposing Voss's imposture, but the killer's identity remained just out of reach, a final note waiting to be played." Chapter 10. The Shocking Twist. The grand salon of Voss Manor, steeped in the heavy silence of impending revelation, seemed to hold its breath as twilight deepened, casting an ethereal glow through the leaded windows. The mahogany-paneled walls, adorned with gilt-framed mirrors, reflected the flickering candelabra, their flames dancing like the unresolved notes of a symphony. The air was thick with the scent of melted wax, the faint musk of polished wood, and an undercurrent of fear that pulsed like a metronome. The chairs, arranged in a tense semicircle, creaked under the weight of their occupants, each suspect a player in the final movement of this deadly composition. The replica sherry decanter, a grim reminder of Elias Voss's murder, stood on a table beside the podium, where a single page of the Symphony No. 7 manuscript lay, its cryptic annotations the key to unmasking a killer. Hercule Poirot, his gray suit immaculate and his mustache a perfect crescent, stood at the center, his small stature commanding the room with the authority of a maestro. His green eyes, sharp and unyielding, swept over the assembled suspects, each face a study in dread. Captain Arthur Hastings, clutching his notebook, stood near the door, his expression a blend of awe and anxiety. Inspector Graves, his tweed suit rumpled from days of relentless investigation, leaned forward, his mustache twitching with anticipation. Constables stood guard at the exits, their presence ensuring no escape from the truth about to be unveiled. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice a clear, resonant melody cutting through the tension like a bow on a taut string. The murder of the man we knew as Maestro Elias Voss was no random act. It was a crescendo of motives, jealousy, greed, revenge, woven into a symphony of deceit. The cipher in his manuscript, "Beware the shadow from the past, it returns to claim what was taken, I am the impostor," reveals his greatest secret. But it also points to his killer gasps echoed through the room. Lydia Voss, her black mourning dress stark against her pale skin, gripped her handkerchief, her violet eyes wide with shock. Adrian Hale, his bandage stark against his auburn hair, sat rigid, his hands clenched. Bertram Kline, his beard bristling, dropped his unlit cigar, his face ashen. Clara Thorne, her spectacles slipping, clutched her notebook, tears welling in her eyes. Dr. Felix Lang, gaunt and composed, leaned back, his scar catching the candlelight, his gray eyes narrowing. Poirot paced, his patent leather shoes clicking softly. The clues, the poisoned sherry, the scarf, the pen, the footprint, the will, were a false score, meant to mislead. Voss, or rather Victor, who assumed his twin brother Elias's identity after the war, encoded his guilt in the symphony. He planned a staged collapse, a small dose of cyanide to escape his debts and enemies. But someone discovered his imposture and swapped the dose for a lethal one. He turned to Lydia. "Madame Voss, you knew of his financial ruin, perhaps suspected his secret. Your scarf near the library, was it truly lost?" Lydia's voice trembled. "I told you, I lost it in the garden. I loved Elias, or Victor, despite everything." Poirot shifted to Adrian. "Monsieur Hale, you were to inherit his estate. Did you decipher the impostor's confession, prompting the attack on you?" Adrian shook his head frantically. "I only saw parts of the cipher. I didn't know he was an impostor." To Kline, Poirot said, "Monsieur Kline, your kinship to Voss, your half-brother, gave you motive. But your grief was genuine, no?" Kline's voice broke. "I wanted his acknowledgement, not his death." Poirot faced Clara. "Mademoiselle Thorne, the poisoned pen in your desk, Your love for Voss, did it turn to betrayal when he rejected you? Clara sobbed. No. The pen was planted. I loved him too much to harm him. Finally, Poirot addressed Lang. Doctor, your past with Voss, Anna, the betrayal, gave you reason. Did you plant the manuscript page to deflect suspicion? Lang's scar twitched. I found it, as I said. My grudge was settled long ago. Poirot paused, letting the tension build. The killer knew Voss's secret and used it. The sherry was poisoned during the premiere. The manuscript sought to silence its truth. One among you orchestrated this, planting clues, attacking Hale, weaving a web to hide their hand. He stopped before Clara, his eyes piercing. Mademoiselle Thorne, you typed the manuscript, saw his fear, knew his secret. You loved him, but when you learned he was Victor, not Elias, your idol crumbled. You stole the greenhouse cyanide, laced the sherry, and planted the pen to frame yourself as a victim. The scarf, the footprint, you used Madame Voss's belongings to shift blame. Clara's spectacles fell, her face crumpling. No, I couldn't. I didn't. But her sobs turned to a wail, and she collapsed, confessing, He lied to me. I worshipped him, but he was a fraud. I couldn't let him deceive the world. The room erupted. Lydia gasped. Adrian stared. Kline cursed. Lang's eyes widened. Graves signaled the constables, who moved to restrain Clara. Poirot's voice softened. The symphony was his confession, but also his undoing. You, mademoiselle, turned his note of guilt into a fatal chord, Hastings whispered. Good Lord, Poirot, her love turned to hate? Graves muttered, Well done, Poirot. The evidence fits. Poirot's eyes twinkled. The little gray cells, they see through the shadows. The truth, it always sings. As Clara was led away, the manor's silence returned, the cipher's melody resolved, its final note echoing in the hearts of those left behind.